What's in there?
Poopies.
That's poop!
Yeah.
Oh, you're right. Even though I had my serious misgivings with Monster Hunter Generations, when the same inept team returned to make Rise, I still gave it a fair shot and played the demo. And, well, it sucked. Yeah, but to make matters even worse, the toxic community of immature crybabies that recently formed around this series threw an absolute hissy fit that I had the audacity to share my opinion on a video game. Because attacking somebody is the best way to change their mind. So I did what any other sane human being would do and just ignored it, instead playing other games that actually interested me and had a great time doing so. Monster Hunter World was incredible, and I'll gladly wait for the inevitable sequel to release. But since its community of insatiable acne-ridden glue eaters hounded me continuously to play the full game anyway, promising me that it wasn't what I thought it was, I caved to shut them all up. Then all those same lonely, drooling fart suckers went into ballistic temper tantrums when it still inevitably sucked. I swear, trolls just crave a negative feedback loop to latch onto and are allergic to holding an opinion of their own that wasn't unabashedly inherited by their paid influencer charlatans like the freaking 10 Commandments. Yes, I played and completed Monster Hunter Rise, including its DLC expansion Sunbreak, for no other purpose other than this review, and my experience with this already lackluster installment was marred by the very piss-gargling baboons who make up this parochial fanbase of stubborn imbeciles. I wanted to surreptitiously ignore this game, but here we are. So with all of that out of the way, I normally like Monster Hunter games. So how was Monster Hunter Rise? I admit, you were all right. I didn't have a fair view of the game just by playing the demo. The full experience was so much worse than I could have possibly imagined! Turn around and drop your pants, we're gonna be here a while. Let's start with the good stuff. You can now have a dog companion on top of a worthless cat accompanying you on your quests. Your Palamute is also large enough to carry you across the map. You can even sharpen on their backs as they scamper up walls and through all-terrain full sprint. Alright, with the good out of the way, onto literally everything else. Even though Rise shares a similar gameplay loop with the rest of the franchise, this game takes the anime over-the-top intensity of Generations and pushes it even further, as opposed to designing around a traditional grounded hunting experience like in World. Rise was developed by the same team who defecated out Generations, the questionably avant-garde folks behind the eye-rollingly anime Frontier spin-off series, where each new monster and mechanic was designed to be even more outrageous than the last. This is a constant separation of aesthetics, clashing with the established series that I grew to love, and it's an unavoidable trait of this entire game's design philosophy that I personally can't get behind. This first new mechanic slingshotting us into complete nonsense is the Wire Bug. The Wire Bug is an attempt to make Iceborne's Clutch Claw gimmick make more sense in universe, which I do greatly appreciate. It's a flying insect companion that will allow you to basically grapple around with silk threads, as well as activate the game's plethora of silly anime attacks taking the place of Generations arts. You're telling me a teleporting bug with video gamey cooldown meters is supposed to be believable when you slingshot around with its magical spider silk as it somehow locks in place mid-air? Not even top-of-the-line police drones could withstand that kind of force. And you're telling me this fairy foo-foo magic bug is supposed to help with immersion? The Insect Glaive is a wonderful example of how the symbiotic relationship of hunter and wildlife can be designed well in form and function. The Wire Bug, however, is a ridiculous excuse to let any hunter class double jump, instantly recover in attack mid-air, and allow all sorts of impossible physics-defying stunts for the sake of cartoonishly flashy action. But since we live in make-believe fantasy land, we can also now run full sprint up any wall or obstacle and can even perform sliding attacks on seemingly flat surfaces, sometimes even sliding uphill. Base Rise has a ninja aesthetic, and they wanted an excuse to have the hunters Prince of Persia-ing their way around the world to fit narratively. Unfortunately, not only does this accidentally get in the way all the time during hunts, it's primarily used to simply get from one part of the egregiously designed maps to another. So even though some classic areas return, every single map in this game has a ton of insanely high cliff faces you need to run up and over in order to get around. All over the place, you'll be falling or getting knocked into deep ravines where the only way back up is an arduous trek around the spaghetti underground tunnels, or to scamper straight up the lowest ledge, utilizing both Wire Bug jumps in hopes of making it back. This forced verticality does nothing but complicate otherwise straightforward traversal, and you'll find yourself willingly leaping into some of these ravine traps due to the game teasing you along with a trail of the next huge gimmick, stat buffing endemic life. This infuriates me! So you remember how World introduced a fully living, breathing ecology with small, believable creatures naturally roaming the environments? Well, now, not only are the new endemic creatures impossible to capture and collect as pets like before, every single one only exists to provide some sort of buff or ability to hunters as you pass or interact with them. Just because you ate a meal to fill your HP and stamina or drank a demon drug to buff your attack, you didn't actually max anything. Instead, there's arbitrary hard caps for everything in order to make sure you spank enough birds and butterflies on every single quest to actually raise those stats completely. This is so heinously counter to the very idea of endemic life that it irrationally makes my blood boil. These creatures that were created to bring realism to the world are now being used exclusively to suck every last drop of immersion right out of the game in favor of transforming their sole purpose into unexplainable video gamey buffs? They don't even make any sense. Spearbirds just fart colored gas on you when you pass them, increasing something based on that color. Even the butterflies are color coded to let you know what skill they'll enhance when you interact with them. I wish so badly you could just ignore this aspect of the game, but you have no choice. It's mechanically integral to the entire game's design. The arena and Elder Dragon fights just drop a multicolored bird in the camp so you can sniff its rainbow farts and instantly max yourself, implying that they honestly intended for hunters to run around the entire goddamn map for every other freaking quest on a pointless, fruity scavenger hunt for bugs and birds when you bought this game to hunt monsters! So instead of adding to the game's ecology, the endemic life actively takes away any semblance of believability to the natural world that this held. There are so many horrible ones with outrageous effects and incredibly corny pun names akin to Pokemon, but I don't have the time nor the mental fortitude to dredge through them all for you. So, World added a brilliant take on the old paintball system by allowing us to follow monster trails with footprints, debris, and remains. It added a whole new engaging take on hunting that gets completely removed in Rise in favor of absolutely nothing. Each monster is automatically marked on your map at all times, whether or not you've even seen them. What on earth are these Nimrods at Capcom thinking? It's like if Zelda completely removed the overworld, leaving a list of shrines and dungeons for you to jump between on a menu. That's half the freaking game you just axed, you fumbling dipwads! Another huge aspect of the game's prior was in making the hunters feel small and struggling for survival against colossal monsters they had no hope in felling. Rise continues Generations' monster disrespect by overly buffing hunters on top of introducing its new take on wyvern riding. Oh lord, so before when another monster invaded your hunt, everything turned frantic. You had to somehow dodge both of the beasts while also keeping an eye on your target. Now you can just use your silly wire bug to mount a monster and literally control them with silk puppet strings to attack the other one. Instead of invading monsters being a threat, they've now become your most powerful weapons. Hunters are encouraged to intentionally lead non-target monsters to the fight just so that they can ride them like a show pony and beat the crap out of the target one. Then after smashing enough faces into Campbell's soup, the non-target monster will always retreat. So there's absolutely no downside to continuously exploiting the other monsters as weapons. I don't understand who this game is for. If the average gamer buys a Monster Hunter game hoping to ride monsters like Yoshis and force them to fight each other, I wholeheartedly admit I have nothing in common with them and can't see myself playing another game after this. It actually gets worse. So if that wasn't enough of a tiny dick power trip, the needlessly complicated switch skill system is the icing on the cake. It is so obtuse and unnecessary, let's just say it's even more menu flipping button combo memorization nonsense than Generations arts. These add further customization to each weapon, but in the end will likely only be used by the hyper fans who refuse to try out the game's other 13 weapons. Now if we didn't bring up Generations enough, the next few quirks of the game will all sound familiar to you. Once again, you have functionally unlimited cat minions to farm, hunt, train, and all sorts of other mindless crap. And every single time you accomplish the tiniest thing in the game's campaign, you gotta run around the entire map and listen to everyone's seemingly unedited monologuing text barf. My concern is more in the sloppy user interface. Veterans of the series will find themselves stumbling over newly phrased everythings for absolutely no reason. Even something as simple as going to the farm and trying to pick up your crops is a hassle in unorganized, sloppy wordplay. Now, if you thought the disastrously implemented endemic life was too video gamey, wait till I introduce you to the pinnacle of crimes against immersion, rampages. Ugh. So occasionally you have to basically play tower defense against the running of the bulls, and I know that sounds stupid, but I promise you that it's actually much worse than I'm making it sound. So get this, you run around and place things like ballistas and cannons with points. Yes, freaking points, and fight off announced waves of monsters. As you fend off these monsters, who all go down in seconds each, you level up your defenses, giving you access to plant better stuff. The goal is to prevent the apex leader of the pack from destroying your last wall of defense. Supposedly you're doing this to protect the town, but you have to level up and spend points just to get the townsfolk to man ballista and help out. Even the chief sits idly by until you unlock his help. Are your homes and lives in danger or not? It's also terribly convenient the monsters always choose to rampage directly through this one fortified trench and not from absolutely any other direction. And how there's only a few on screen at once, and when you defeat one it just dissolves slowly as your attacks miss and leaves you nothing to carve. And how a silly hunter gong suddenly quadruples your weapon power for no discernible reason. This whole event is the most asinine video gaming nonsense I've ever seen. Oh, and when he says they're led by apexes, don't get excited like they're bringing back that idea from 4. No, this is an inexcusable translation error where now there is apexes, the new watered down deviant monsters from Generations, and apexes, the terrifying indestructible death machines from 4. How does something like this happen? Do I have to mail these goofballs a thesaurus? Well, Sunbreak didn't think that was enough and decided to add its own take on the old lazy hyper-tempered gimmick system called Risen Monsters. It's thematically exactly what apexes used to be, but functionally what arc-tempered elder dragons were from Iceborne. TLDR, it's nothing new. It also sorta kinda added its own frenzy virus thing for monsters afflicted by the new parasitic curio, but it's mostly for lore and only has negligible changes in gameplay, unlike the frenzy virus. Now with all that crap out of the way, assuming you can suck it up and just have some fun and hunt some monsters, I've got some bad news for you. Though there's plenty of new and returning monsters, the game's single-player village campaign is shockingly short. There isn't even a high rank, and the whole ordeal is over before it even has the time to properly begin. Rise redefines the minimum amount of village quests, leaving everything else to the hub, both of which can now be played in multiplayer, nullifying the entire point of their separation. This entire gameplay experience feels like a meticulously researched self-sabotage of everything that made Monster Hunter so much fun to begin with. It was even released in an unfinished state where the main story didn't even have a conclusion. They had to patch that in post-launch, meaning that once the servers go down, this physical game will be forever unfinished and incompletable. The greedy bastards ruining one of my favorite franchises can't even help themselves from releasing unfinished cash grabs, knowing they'll be double charging the poor saps who paid full price for the rest of the game when they do get around to finishing it. Well, it's a good thing they added those dogs. We almost didn't have anything nice to say. At least it's not another 3DS port, even though honestly now that I say that, a port of 3 or 4U would have been infinitely better than what we got. The game looks comparable to World and runs well on the Switch, which is good to see. The water effect on fur and scales is also quite nice. We rarely see texture changes when things get wet in games. Is it obvious that I'm reaching here? Yes, now let's just get to the real meat of it. Water looks nice, but the elemental blights have never looked so hideous. Monsters will glow with a bright colored cloak that honestly looks like a debug mode filter or something. It's awful. So Rise is themed off ninjas and Sunbreak is themed off knights. Well, supposedly. It's actually Japan's loosely researched interpretation of the theme. I love medieval stuff and dressed the part in fully layered armor only to feel like the only clown in a half-baked circus. It's anime nights at best, and it comes off more like a costume party where nobody wanted to commit to their outfits. And it doesn't matter if you're in Naruto land or King Arthur's underwhelming outhouse, the canteen will only serve you cake pops. Hope you didn't miss Monster Hunter's deliciously rendered mouth-watering dishes from before, cause it's a whole lot easier to model colored balls. Every day we're serving hemorrhoids and diabetes. Oh, and remember the hokey cutscenes the monsters got when you first saw them in Generations? Those are back, and now with amateur Mad Libs poetry and thick film grain filters. The best part is they forgot to switch the Japanese theme to a European one for Sunbreak, so it's not even trying to be consistent. Those were just so extra, I just tuned those out. It was the ink-brushed monster icons that threw me off. You go from Rise to Sunbreak, and they didn't even think to update the icons accordingly, once again throwing aesthetics to the wind. The icons also have like zero personality this time, and some I can't even identify what I'm looking at. At least the loading screen scrolling banner art changes aesthetics, making the others that didn't more jarring. But that stupid loading screen ended up spoiling like half the returning monsters for me. And the new monsters are supremely goofy or otherwise over the top, like everybody's trying too hard. But at least there's more new ones than Generations. Speaking of which, here's how I feel about all of them. Small monsters. Cross a raccoon with a hippo and you'll get this deformed, unlovable, obese, explosive fart badger. This is a a Boggy. No, not Boggy from 3, Boggy from Sunbreak. I guess we forgot that we already named a small raptor monster of similar size and persuasion the same name. And it doesn't have a great form, by the way, it's just Boggy. This is a skunk goat, and I love it. I'm so glad I played through this entire game so I could meet the skunk goat. It's just another Velociprey, jockey, macaw, etc. Is Monster Hunter becoming Pokemon and we need a new 3-stage bird and butterfly every game? Flaming spider ticks who accidentally wore a winter coat to an active volcano. And here's his orange cousin called a Pyrantula. If you told me this was a new Pokemon, I'd believe you. Large monsters. Flame-barfing peacock flamingo. Salamander dog with endless streams of molten diarrhea. Supposedly this one's different because it's pretending to replace Agnactor in the volcano, and I assure you this annoying flaming silly putty flinger is no glorious Gariel. Rafiki the circus acrobat spawning infinite persimmons from under its fuzzy monkey boob fat. And here he is when he inputs a cheat code for infinite mini fridge size exploding pine codes from his fuzzy monkey boob fat. This spiky spawn of Frontier is the wyvern accumulative of a 2-timing Hummer driving white trash redneck who beats both his wives. Because spewing fire, poison, and paralysis wasn't enough, now Maverick McDouche Nuggets threw defense down into the mix and 2 full-size American flags to the back of his pickup truck. An underwhelming Gogmazios wannabe you unironically face in the yawning abyss, with magically respawning Gatling guns in between back and forth slapping contests. Football gorilla who dug up the TMs for Fire Punch, Ice Punch, Water Punch, Blast Punch, Hawaiian Punch, and still fights by slamming his hollow skull in the dirt. Haven't I ever told you about Bumbles? Bumbles spit on their hands to freeze their arms into ice swords. Man, if you didn't do that, I'd have loved this big stupid Yeti. Great Macau with a classy haircut for his new driver's license photo. Werewolf cosplaying as Blue Eyes White Dragon. Antlered crusty magma marshmallow packs a unique ailment gimmick, all but forcing players to exploit the wire bug to remove it. Ugly, gimmicky, and unfun. Where power creep is a constant problem for trading card games, insanity creep plagues these new monsters, resulting in ludicrously fantastical silliness like this magical blade doofus. Count Dracula covered in butterfly leeches. Yet another Elder Dragon there's supposedly only one of that you defeat in the story, but somehow hunt a dozen more to make your armor and weapons. And yes, he has an extremely anime second phase as well. The considerably stronger form of Malzeno before it's afflicted with the Sucky Suckies. Even though that's completely backwards with the logic of how the other afflicted monsters we face work, but who's honestly still keeping track? Nothing screams magical make-believe like a fox that spits fire bubbles. Nursilla on fire that throws its babies like grenades. And Nursilla isn't even in this game. So this one explodes a little more, I think. I fought each of these, and I swear I can barely discern half of the differences. 30-foot Mur-Otter unnaturally swimming in ankle-deep water. And here's another one to help pad out the monster list. Silly Kappa Platypus Frog Muffin. Floating egg sac hoarding double jaw dragon that fights you with big yellow circles. I'm not joking, it's going after your fear of geometry, which you also have to dodge with wire bugs while you shoot magically floating rocks with conveniently mounted ballista. The fact that this thing's ultimate form, much less second phase, didn't involve it dying before the egg sac bursts open with loads of tiny floating thunder dragon babies in a true final fight is an oversight I will never understand. Imagine you're a massive floating dragon, but you decide to hover a couple feet off the ground with your head generously presented on a silver platter for hunters to smack. If you can't tell the difference between these three things, that's because they decided to name the males and females differently again, and the third is unabashedly a name for one's enraged state to help pad out the lineup. No, the Gen U flagship is not in this game. This is actually a Crimson Glow Valstrax, noob. See, the name is totally different. The more I look at these, the more I think the Frontier aesthetic is the inevitable future of Monster Hunter, whether I like it or not. It's like we saw the malignant cancer growing in a prostate exam years ago, but now we can't treat it without removing 2 feet of our colon. Did you get that, Rise and Sunbreak defenders? He made an analogy about butts, just to make sure you understood. More like windbreak. That one was a fart joke, and butts make farts. I'm sorry we didn't establish that sooner. Alright, Monster Hunter stories always suck, so I never had my hopes up for this to begin with. A talented writer can tell a good story with any setting and characters. Monster Hunter having traditionally bland stories isn't due to it being impossible to tell a compelling one, it's due to developer indifference and/or lack of talent. It doesn't really help when they launch a game in an unfinished state and the main story doesn't even freaking conclude. Can it get any more obvious that this was a shameless cash grab? So in Rise, you help out a village of cosplaying teenagers who watched too much Naruto from a series of incoming monster rampages, which once again happen only in the heavily fortified trench fully armed with ballistas and cannons. These people certainly did not need you. And once again, you crawl through this bare bones plot by chipping away at key quests one at a time. You take down the cover monster along the way, and the game unceremoniously gives you end credits without building up any sort of climax whatsoever. Most people stop playing and move on to the next game when they reach end credits. That's what credits are. They go at the end. But you'll easily reach this point in a few short hours. At least it's an indicator for you to just stop now. You've seen enough. It might as well be over. So of course it's not, and next up, a big floaty snake possesses some twins and they go into a glowy trance, warning you that there's a big floaty snake that you gotta kill. So you kill the big floaty snake, or rather defeat it, but you don't see a body and you know it's still alive. And that's how the base game ends. So after some post-launch patches, you eventually kill the big floaty snake and its mate, even though they were just trying to get it on, you insensitive cock blocker. Cloaca blocker? So after whatever that was, you head off to the DLC where you're recruited to hunt 3 lords, as they call them, which all end up being fantasy interpretations of universal horror monsters, because that's the first thing I think of when I think of medieval beasts. Frankenstein, Wolfman, and Dracula. Do they not have a research team? Do they not have libraries in Japan? Is Capcom not aware of Google? They unironically decided to make the flagship monsters of their medieval nightly expansion American film adaptations from the 1930s? So eventually you find a flock of butterfly leeches is causing the real pandemonium, so you hunt down the source of their parasitic infestation and call it a day. Half of the story was hunting down a doctor and getting medicine for one hunter who got infected by these things from one hit. But of course Capcom's too chicken to actually kill anyone, and this threat never happens again, even when you fight the same monster and take dozens of hits. Are we just gonna forget this entire plot thread we spent half of the game establishing? I was pretty upset that they just keep telling and not showing for the whole story. Supposedly the entire ecosystem was dying to these things, but whenever you went on a hunt, you never actually saw it. That's infuriating storytelling, but eventually there was a quest where you saw some bodies on the floor, but not nearly to the extent that we were told. Besides, if you were a clan of humans fighting off giant monsters and they all started dying from a parasite that isn't attacking you, that's a dream come true scenario! Sure, it's blatant amateur storytelling that's incapable of the show don't tell philosophy. Sure, every character is as dry and lifeless as a loaf of bread, but it's the sheer deluge of rambling dialogue that pushes me over the edge. It's like they had an AI generate the dialogue after feeding it hundreds of hours of Dragon Ball and One Piece as reference, but asked it to write in the style of a straight-faced WWE match. You know, Monster Hunter could learn a lot from God Eater, which ironically is the over-the-top anime hunter-looter series that Monster Hunter wants to be anymore. But of all things to imitate, why was it the cringy one-liners in combat? I'm the best! Nothing can stop me! You won't know what hit you! Bring it on! I'm ready for anything! I rock! Triumph is ours! What's this?
Oh, well, you can turn it off. It's not a real issue.
Then why is it on by default and the mute option is buried in menus? This one's gonna hit hard! Now I'm mad! I'm the hunting boy! I'm the one who wins! Daddy needs a new pair of boots! Nobody likes this! At least you can change it to Japanese or Monster Hunter grunts and set the frequency to 0. But even that doesn't stop the annoying chatter you get from characters while in menus like at the quest board in Smithy. Can you please maybe open that dresser drawer over there and stick a sock in it? And speaking of voices, for some reason most of the music this time has either nasally egregious singing or monotonous choral chanting in the background for absolutely no reason. It's not like the music benefited by having some lady play her nostrils like a clarinet. I'm mostly bothered when intense character-themed tracks for returning unique monsters get needlessly generalized into the same old droning chant. Music is usually one of the best aspects of this series, but these remixes all suck! How do you screw up Zenogre or Chameleos' themes this badly? And for the love of God, why is Yoko Ono freestyle yodeling in the sandy plains? My favorite track plays whenever you clear an urgent quest. Yeah, you can't forget this one. Good stuff. If you see a game called Monster Hunter and expect Naruto killing Circus Reject kaijus while nonstop dropping cringy Spider-Man quips, then this is the perfect game for you. I have 100%ed all English Monster Hunter games, including Gen U up to this point, but this is the first one I simply refuse. Not even my obsessive autism can carry me through this dumpster fire. This is Monster Hunter committing to go in a direction I disagree with on a fundamental level. It doesn't matter how many nostalgic returning monsters they add to the game when the foundation itself itself is beyond repair. Take it from someone who loves Monster Hunter. If this team continues churning out this laughable garbage, then I can't see myself continuing to waste my time with them when there's so many other great games I could be playing instead. So by sell it, we mean go get your money back and play something good. The positive gamer in me at least had enough fun laughing through this travesty to give Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak a 2 out of 10. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it for the clowns defending this goofy disgrace to the series. This game sucks, and I'm thrilled to never have to play it, much less talk about it ever again. The critical gamer in me struggles to justify the undercooked disappointment that is Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, settling on a 3 out of 10. At its core, it's still the winning Monster Hunter formula, but it's seemingly every turn it never ceases to undermine and tarnish its own legacy. To those of you who are capable of forming your own opinion and not being offended that another person's exists, what did you think? Let us know how your positive and critical sides rate Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak in the comments below. Unless you're one of those intolerant incel posers pissing yourself in fury that somebody on the internet didn't like your counterfeit hyper anime sham. 'Cause you're just playing it with yourself. And your waifu is trash. I hope you all appreciate how awful the drawing is I made for this week. I feel like this is even more egregious than the drawing I did of Dora the Explorer for the Resident Evil episode. And special thanks to Squad Fam for actually sending in a copy of this game as well as the DLC for Sunbreak so I could even review it. Even though I just ripped on it, it doesn't matter. I still very much appreciate getting a chance to play it because I love this series and it matters to me to be able to share my opinion and figure out how I actually feel about the rest of the games, whether or not I like them or not. But either way, that is all the time I have for now. Thank you for watching. Remember to like this video and subscribe for more, and use the links in the description to nominate your own episode. And thank you to all of our Patreon members, Arrow, Aspen, Crystal, Sid, Genio, Laura, and Squad Fam. Boop!